Welcome to Zen Money Monday, weekly conversations with innovators, thought leaders, and entrepreneurial junkies about building good businesses, exploring what the idea of Zen money really means, and how to achieve it. With your host, author, business strategist, and Zen Money CFO, Liz LaJoy.
Hello, welcome back to Zen Money Monday. I hope you've had a fantastic week. If you missed last week's episode, it was our 50th episode. We had a big celebration where I put myself in the hot seat and was interviewed by my friend Tamara Arnold. We dove deep into how Zen Money and our Zen Money initiative came to be and a whole bunch of other stuff. So if you haven't listened to it, you can go to zenmoneymap.com/050 to catch that episode. And today, because we are officially into October now, I want to talk about third quarter review and how to get yourself set up really well to roll into this last push of the year. So this is the time of year that I love the most because we are able to get some really good data. So if we look at our business in an individual month, that may not give us a whole lot of information. I mean, it gives us information specific to what happened in the past 30 days or what happened in the month of January. But when we start to get through to this point of the year, if our business is running on a fiscal year that matches the calendar year in particular, if it doesn't, we want to shift this conversation to whatever 9 months into your fiscal year is. But assuming that most of us are now 9 months through our year as a business, this is a fantastic time because we have racked up 9 consecutive months, and that starts to give us some really interesting metrics that we can use to analyze what is going on in our business now, especially in 2020, depending on when you're listening to this. If you're listening to this right now, 2020 has been really a big question mark for many of us. Some of us have done a lot better than we expected, but the pandemic has really, challenged many of us to think about how we're doing our business or rethink how we're doing our business. So this is a really great time because we now have 3 quarters, i.e. 9 months out of the year, that we can look back and do some strategic analysis. So here's how I like to do it when we're working with our clients. There's 4 or 5 things that we really want to take a look at. One, I want to look back over the last 9 months and review our income, of course, right? How are we doing against our overarching goals? And we can get that by just looking at our totals. Now, if you're using a system like QuickBooks or Xero, then it should be pretty easy, assuming that your bookkeeping is up to date, to go back and say, how much did I make, right? You can look at it on an accrual basis, which is a fancy term for saying, how much did I invoice? This may or may not be the same number as your cash income because people may or may not have paid you in the same time frame. But it's a great way to say, where do we actually stand today, right? That's the first piece of the puzzle is we have to go back and collect this data and look at what did we make in the past 9 months? And also, of course, what did we spend? Because we want to look at all pieces of your financial equation, which are, again, income minus your expenses equals your profit. So we want to look at each of those buckets, okay? So we want to look at how much total did we make January 1st through September 30th. How much did we spend January 1st through September 30th? And how much was left over in profit for us? Because again, for most of us, our profit number is the number that we can use to calculate how much can we safely and strategically, I always like to throw strategically and maybe I overuse it, but anyway, how much can we safely take out of our business without hurting our business? And that profit bucket is also the bucket we want to be thinking about in terms of how much of that and or how much of our income do we want to set aside for taxes, or do we need to set aside for taxes, I should say, because most of us don't want to set aside for taxes, but it's part of the deal. It's part of doing business, right? So we want to look back over the last 9 months and figure out those 3 numbers for ourselves: total income, total expenses, and total profit. And in that process, I would also love for you to calculate your monthly average, because many of us don't have consistent income month over month. You might have some seasons or quarters that are higher than others. But if we average it out, that actual number can tell us a lot about the projecting part. So the next piece of the puzzle is really to calculate how much is your average income, how much were your average expenses, and what was your average profit over the past 9 months as well. So the cool thing about this, again, is that you get to look and see what your trends are starting to be. So if you had a fantastic summer, but the 6 months prior weren't really great, then when we average it out, we're going to get a better sense of where we stand. Why is this important? It just gives you a bigger picture springboard to start future forward thinking. So that's the first piece of the puzzle. And by the way, we are going to start giving you guys some checklists along with these podcasts so that you can make this super meaningful. So if you go to the show notes, show page for this, you can download a checklist to help yourself walk through your third quarter planning and mapping out, or you can just go to zenmoneymap.com/download. And you can grab this week's checklist. So this will all be mapped out and you can see it visually if you're a visual kind of person. But to get back into this, so we've calculated your monthly average income and expenses and profits. The next step is to double check that profit and your tax set aside. So I've talked about the fact that this number, the tax number, could be all over the place. To be really conservative, it's a great idea to set aside 30 to 40% of your cash revenue, your cash income, the dollars right off the top flowing into your business. If you squirrel away 30% of that every single month, and this takes some consistency and some, willpower to do that off the top every single month. But if you squirrel that away in a savings account, then you are never going to be caught short in terms of not having enough money to pay your quarterly taxes or enough money to pay when you balance it out at the end of the year. You may also have been in business long enough to know that I can take a percentage off of my profit numbers, because at the end of the day, it's really your profit number that your true taxes are taken out of, especially if you're an LLC, a sole proprietor. I'm doing this in the wrong order. If you're a sole proprietor, an LLC, or an S-Corp filing, all of that are coming down to your personal taxes, and all of those personal taxes are based on the profit in your business. So why do we set aside based on cash receipts and not the profit number? If we don't know our tax basis, if we don't know the basic tax rate, which is going to change for everybody. If you're a single person who doesn't have any kids, who is a sole proprietor, that tax rate is going to be really different than somebody who has children and a spouse who has a job, where they're a W-2 employee. So we just want to, over time, we can get a better sense of that, and you might be able to make that calculation. Maybe it's 25% of your profit. Consistently that's what you want to set aside. So this is where understanding our numbers can really help us in the long term. But if we don't know, then that 30% number is a really great place to start, because it will just guarantee that you're taken care of. So look at the last 9 months, look at your total profit, and look at the monies and the amount of cash that you've set aside toward taxes. This would include the amount that you've already paid in estimated taxes, if you've had any. This year is a little funky because the Q1 dollars that are supposed to be sent in April, many of those got postponed. So you may have had a double payment in June or July, depending on when that got sent in. So, it's a little bit squeaky in terms of what actually got sent in. Your timing might be a little bit off. But if you typically are used to paying estimated quarterlies, then you're probably back on track. Now that we're in October, we will probably actually have sent something in last month. So we want to add up everything we've paid in, right? And we want to figure out, before we do that, we want to figure out what you feel your right percentage set aside is. And then we subtract out what we have already sent in, and we see what the difference is. And if there's, if we've underfunded our tax set aside, now is a great time to make a plan for how you're going to get that back up to snuff. And we, of course, want to catch up for what we didn't set aside. If you find yourself in this position, we want to catch up, but then we also need to make sure that we're continuing to set aside for October, November, and December, so that you get to the end of the year with the right set aside amount. I hope that makes sense. But this is the next step 2, we'll call it, is just to double check your profit and tax set asides. You can look at how much you've actually taken out. You may find that you've been really in line and conservative, and there's some extra profits that you could make a distribution to yourself for if you have cash on hand and that's where you want to put it. You may find that you took out more, which means we were leveraging debt or credit cards in some way to help get extra cash in your pocket while the business maybe wasn't making as much as you thought it would. So this is a great time to look at that entire calculation and verify that the amount that you're taking out can be sustained by your business. All right, so step 4 is we take all this information and we use it to review against your 2020 goals, your initial ones. They may have changed a few times along the way, but how much are we off? Are we on track for hitting whatever dollars you set for yourself, whether that's $80,000 in revenue this year or $500,000 in revenue this year or $1 million, whatever it is. We want to look at where we're at now compared to what we projected. And if all things are equal, in a sort of, canned, airtight environment, then we should be 3/4 of the way toward our revenue goal. We should be 3/4 of the way toward our expense goal. We should be 3/4 of the way toward our profit goals. My guess is nobody listening is right on the dot. So this is a great time to say, how far are we off and what would need to happen to hit those same goals. You may do this analysis when we project out over the next 3 months and say, look, I'm behind. There's no way I'm going to pick this back up just based on my knowledge of the market and where things stand right now. But I'm going to shift my expectations and try to hit a new dollar amount in revenue. Maybe I'll cut some spending so that I can continue paying myself, right? These are all of the back and forth analysis conversations we can have with ourselves or our staff or the people who are helping us, figure all this out, so that you can project forward for really clear and real, I guess is the right word, number for your next 3 months, so that you have a known 3-month goal. This part of the year is interesting because something happens in the fall where I think we all get a little rejuvenated. We kind of look at the end of the year as a final push. And so having this review time right now to go against where you thought you wanted to be and get really, honest with ourselves about what's possible. You might find yourself in the opposite position where you're like, hey, I'm doing really good. I can take, I'm not going to take my foot off the gas entirely, but I'm also not going to stress too much because we seem to be on track. And again, this is assuming that we have a January 1 through December 31 fiscal year for your business. If you're off with that, some of my clients' fiscal year ends at the end of October or November. And so, obviously we've been doing this kind of planning for the last couple of months as well. So we want to review against our 2020 goals. We want to make sure that we're very clear on what our next 3 months projections are looking like with some adjustments based on what you know. Maybe you know that, your monthly average for the last 9 months is fine, but you're not going to use for expenses, for example, but you're not going to use that for the next 3 months because you have a couple of annual big ticket expenses coming up. So you're going to use adjusted numbers for your expenses to make sure that, you're not telling yourself you're going to do great when actually you have some bigger spend coming up, or vice versa around contracts. Maybe you have annual contracts and a lot of them have already come due and fall is usually a little bit low for you, right? This is how we can start to plan. And then the last thing around quarterly planning that I like to do is really just take a hard look at shifting our expectations and or what we need to have happening. Boy, I can't talk today. What we need to have happening to hit those goals and really understand what the fourth quarter could really, really look like. I'm using that word all over the place today too. What that could really look like for you in a pretty granular, realistic kind of way. I think when we start planning at the beginning of the year, we use broad brush strokes in terms of numbers and we don't necessarily get into the nitty gritty. And now that we have data behind us and we have only 3 months left to go in the year, this is a fantastic time to get more specific while we still have time to steer the ship in a different way, to maybe implement some new offerings, to get to a point where, we can really create the kind of financial flow that you were hoping to get in this fiscal year. So, third quarter review, it can be fun. It doesn't have to take a whole lot of time. But again, what we want to be looking at is, where have we been this year? We now have 9 months worth of data to do a little bit of analysis on. If you need help with this, then you can ask your bookkeeper or your accountant to help you pull the numbers off of your profit and loss statement, for example. Or if you're doing this in a spreadsheet yourself or in the back of a napkin, also great time to just sit down and spend some dreaming, scheming time around your numbers, using what's actually been happening this year and projecting it forward over the next 3 months. We are going to be talking about, how to then leverage into creating a plan for 2021. What year-end budgeting looks like. The next 3 months are pretty exciting from a financial management standpoint because there's a lot going on and there's a lot of time to step back and say, where do we really want to go? So we will dive into that again. But in the meantime, if you want to download the third quarter checklist, again, all you have to do is go to zenmoneyback.com/download to catch that file for this week. And stick around for next week because I'm going to be speaking with Caroline Yankee, who is a client of mine, and she's also a business attorney. So we're going to dig into all the things legal around your business, which I'm sure many of you will be interested in hearing. And we're also going to talk about some other fun things that she and I have been doing together. So stick around for that. And in the meantime, I hope you have a fantastic week. If you haven't taken the Zen Money quiz yet, I really encourage you to go to zenmoneymap.com/quiz to give that a shot, because it's a really great first step in figuring out where you want to set yourself up around your financial management, what kind of team you want to build for yourself, and how we can get this part of your business, your financial foundation, feeling as strong and flexible and grounded as possible. Hope you guys have a great week. Would you like to get into this conversation a little bit more live? We have started Zen Money Chats, where I'm going live on Facebook on our business page on Wednesdays at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time to talk about this week's topic and any other questions that you bring to the table. So we'll put a link in the show notes, but if you want to scoot on over and look up Zen Money Initiative or the @handle of Zen Money CFO, I'd love to see you there and hear what you've got going on in real time.